The night Verity found out, she was just trying to get a glass of water. It was past 11. The house was dark, and she had already put Lily down for the second time, after the toddler woke up crying from a bad dream. Verity's feet were bare on the cold hardwood as she padded down the stairs, one hand trailing the wall, not wanting to flip the lights on and wake anyone else up. That was the kind of person she was. Always careful, always thinking about everyone else first. She heard voices coming from the back of the house, low, steady, the kind of conversation people have when they think no one's listening. She recognized both of them immediately, her husband Brandon, and his mother Sylvia. Verity paused at the bottom of the stairs. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop, she genuinely wasn't. But then she heard her own name, and something in her chest went very still. "Verity's not going to find out," Brandon said. "She doesn't check the joint account. She never has." Sylvia made a sound, not quite a laugh but close. She should have gone back to work 2 years ago. A woman who doesn't earn her own money doesn't have any leverage. That's just the truth. "Mom, I'm serious, Brandon. We need that transfer done before the 15th. Her parents sign on the 14th. Once the money hits their account, we move fast. You said they trust you." Verity pressed her back flat against the wall. Her heart was doing something she couldn't name. Not racing. More like stuttering. Like a car trying to start in the cold. Her parents. The money from the 14th. She knew exactly what that meant. Her mom and dad had been selling a piece of land they'd held for 30 years. Land that had been in her mother's family since before Verity was born. They had finally found a buyer. The closing was set for June 14th. It wasn't a fortune, but for her parents it was security. It was their retirement. They had talked about it over Sunday dinners for months, and Verity had sat across the table from her father while he described what he was going to do with the money. How he wanted to fix the roof and maybe take her mom somewhere warm for their anniversary. She had felt proud of them, relieved for them. Now she stood in the dark, 10 feet away from her husband, and understood that he had been planning to take it. She made it back upstairs without making a sound. She sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. Lily was breathing softly through the baby monitor on the nightstand. Brandon's side of the bed was empty and cool. Verity did not cry. She thought that was strange later. She had expected to cry. Instead, she just sat there, feeling something hard and new settle into place inside her, like a bone that had been broken and healed wrong finally being set right. She had been with Brandon for 7 years, married for 5. She had quit her job as a registered nurse 18 months into their marriage, because Brandon said it made more sense. His income was higher, the commute was brutal, and they were planning to have a baby. It had seemed logical at the time. She had believed him when he said it was practical, not a power move. She had believed him about a lot of things. She picked up her phone from the nightstand and opened her banking app. She hadn't looked at the joint account in weeks. She scrolled through the transaction history slowly, methodically, the way she used to review a patient's chart before a shift. The withdrawal started 8 months ago. Small at first, 200 here, 300 there, amounts that could be explained as groceries or gas. Then they grew. $1,000 in February, $1,500 in March. Last month, nearly $4,000, transferred to an account she didn't recognize. She put the phone face down on the mattress. She sat with that for a long moment. Then she picked it up again and opened her contacts. She scrolled to a name she hadn't dialed in almost a year, her college roommate Petra, and then stopped herself. Not yet. She needed to think before she talked to anyone. She needed a plan. Verity was good at making plans. That was something Brandon never understood about her. He thought of her as soft, patient, accommodating. He had confused those things with weakness. She spent the next 3 days acting like nothing had changed. She made breakfast. She gave Lily her bath. She smiled when Sylvia came over for dinner on Thursday and said the pot roast was dry. "A little more time on the stove, sweetheart, that's all." And Verity nodded and said she'd keep that in mind. She listened to Brandon talk about his work, about a client he was trying to impress, about a golf trip he was thinking of planning with some guys from his office. She asked the right questions. She laughed at the right moments. At night, when he was asleep, she worked. She had started keeping a notebook, a small, spiral-bound one she bought with cash at the drugstore, 2 blocks from Lily's pediatrician's office. She wrote everything down: dates, amounts, the name of the account the money had been transferred to, the things she'd overheard. She wasn't sure yet what she would need, but she understood instinctively that documentation was everything. She also called her sister. Rhea was 4 years younger and had never liked Brandon. She had never said so directly, not in words, but Verity had always known. When Verity told her what she'd heard, quietly, in the parking lot of a grocery store while Lily slept in her car seat, Rhea didn't say "I told you so." She just asked what Verity needed. Can I stay with you? Verity asked. When I'm ready to leave. Can Lily and I come to you? Yes, Rhea said immediately. Obviously, yes. You don't even have to ask. Verity exhaled for what felt like the first time in 3 days. The second call was harder. She looked up family law attorneys in her county, found 3 with good reviews, and called the one whose office was farthest from her neighborhood. She didn't want to risk running into anyone she knew. She made an appointment for the following Tuesday, during the window when Lily was at daycare, and Brandon was always in back-to-back meetings. She paid the consultation fee with her personal credit card, the one she'd had since before the marriage, the one still in her name alone, the one with a small limit she'd never quite gotten around to closing. She was grateful for that now. She was grateful for all the small practical habits she'd kept without fully knowing why. The attorney's name was Ms. Caldwell. She was in her 50s, unhurried, with reading glasses on a beaded chain, and the kind of energy that made Verity feel like she was talking to someone who had heard everything and was not going to flinch. Verity laid out what she knew, the withdrawals, the conversation she'd overheard, the lantern sale, her parents. Miss Caldwell took notes without interrupting. When Verity finished, Miss Caldwell looked up. Do you have documentation of the transfers? Screenshots. And I wrote down the account number the money went to. Good. She made another note. Have you said anything to your husband? No. Good. She said again. Don't. Not yet. Not until we've talked more. Verity nodded. You need to understand something, Miss Caldwell said. She took off her glasses and set them on the desk. The money that came out of your joint account is marital property. He can't just take it, regardless of whose income it originally came from. What you've described, if it can be proven, goes beyond ordinary dissipation of assets. The plan involving your parents' money, that's a different matter entirely, potentially a criminal one. Have you told your parents? Verity shook her head. You're going to need to. Carefully, and with documentation, so they understand what they're dealing with before that closing date. The closing was 12 days away. She told her parents on a Saturday. She drove to their house on the pretense of dropping off a casserole. Something she did often enough that neither Brandon nor Sylvia would think anything of it. She sat at her parents' kitchen table, the same table where she'd done her homework as a kid, and she put the notebook in front of them and her phone beside it with the screenshots pulled up, and she told them everything. Her mother, whose name was Frances. No, wait. Her mother, Yvonne, went very quiet. That was the thing about Yvonne. She got quiet when she was frightened. Verity had learned a long time ago that the absence of sound from her mother was not peace. Her father, Walter, asked her to repeat the part about the account transfer. He read it again off her phone. He put the phone down carefully, like it was something fragile. Brandon, he said. Just the name. Yes. And his mother was part of this. She was the one who said we need the transfer done before the 15th. Those were her exact words. Walter looked at Yvonne. Something passed between them that Verity couldn't read. Then he looked back at his daughter. What do you need from us? She hadn't expected that to be the thing that finally made her cry. She had sat dry-eyed through all of it, the overheard conversation, the banking records, the attorney's office. But something about the simple, unconditional way her father asked that question, what do you need, broke something loose inside her. She pressed her hand over her mouth. She sat there for a moment. I need to leave him, she said, and I need to make sure he can't get to your money. Walter nodded. Then that's what we'll do. Yvonne reached across the table and covered Verity's hand with both of hers. You and Lily are going to be all right, she said. You hear me? That's the only thing that matters. Walter called the title company first thing Monday morning. He explained that there had been a change in plans and asked what it would take to direct the proceeds to an account that Brandon had no connection to. The title company walked him through the process. It was simpler than any of them expected. Brandon had never been on the deed. He had no legal standing in that transaction. The closing happened on the 14th, as planned. The money went to a new account Walter had opened the week before. Verity's parents called her from the title company parking lot. She was sitting in Rhea's spare bedroom, Lily asleep on the pullout next to her, a half-eaten sleeve of crackers on the nightstand. She had left Brandon's house 6 days earlier. She had chosen a weekday morning while Lily was at daycare and Brandon was in a staff meeting. She had packed 2 bags, one for herself, one for Lily, and she had taken the documents she needed from the filing cabinet in Brandon's home office. Their marriage certificate, Lily's birth certificate, her own social security card, her nursing license. She had taken the spiral notebook. She had taken nothing that wasn't hers. She had also, before she left, emailed Brandon a single line from an address she'd created just for that purpose. I know about the transfers. I know about your mother's plan. My attorney will be in touch. She sent it while she was sitting in her car in the driveway, engine running. Then she backed out and drove to Ria's apartment. Brandon called 16 times that day. She didn't answer. She let Ms. Caldwell handle it from there. What followed was not fast. That was the part no one tells you. You imagine leaving as the ending, but it's actually the beginning of a different, harder chapter. There were court dates and paperwork and long phone calls with Miss Caldwell about what could be proven and what couldn't. There were conversations with a forensic accountant, a soft-spoken man named Henry who specialized in exactly this kind of case and who found over the course of 6 weeks that the total drain from the joint account came to just over $22,000. There were days when Verity felt certain she would win, and days when she felt like she was standing at the bottom of something very deep with no clear path up. Sylvia called her once, from a number Verity didn't recognize. She picked up by accident. Sylvia's voice was steady and cold. "You're making a mistake," she said. Verity thought about everything she wanted to say, all the things she had swallowed for 5 years, all the dinners she had cooked that were never quite right, all the ways Sylvia had managed to make Verity feel like a guest in her own marriage. "I don't think so," Verity said, and she hung up. Brandon's attorney tried twice to argue that the money transfers had been for shared marital expenses. Henry's report made that argument difficult to sustain. The account the money went to was traced back to a private LLC registered in Sylvia's name, a business Verity had never been told existed. Miss Caldwell called it commingling and fraudulent dissipation. The judge called it grounds for an unequal distribution of remaining marital assets. Verity didn't get everything back, but she got enough. More than enough, combined with what the court awarded her in child support and the nursing shifts she had gone back to working 2 months after leaving. She had called the hospital where she used to work on a Thursday afternoon from Ria's couch, her resume pulled up on her laptop, Lily drawing on the floor beside her with washable markers. The charge nurse who answered was someone she'd worked with before, a woman named Deb, who let out a little sound of recognition. "Verity. I wondered when you were going to call." She was back on the floor within 3 weeks. "There is something nobody prepares you for when your marriage ends. Not the sadness, you expect that. Not even the anger, though that comes in waves. It's the strange and specific relief of no longer wondering, of finally knowing, of not having to second-guess every version of events and whether you're seeing things clearly, or being too sensitive, or expecting too much. The uncertainty is exhausting in a way that's very hard to explain to someone who hasn't lived it. And when it's gone, when you're finally standing on the other side of it, you realize how much energy you were spending just to stay in the dark. Verity wasn't there yet, not all the way. She knew that. Some mornings she still woke up in Ria's spare room and had to locate herself all over again. Remember where she was, remember why, let it settle before she could move. Lily had started asking for her dad, simple and matter-of-fact, the way toddlers do, and Verity always answered honestly at the level Lily could understand. "Daddy lives somewhere else now. We're going to see him on Saturdays." "Yes, he loves you. Yes, you'll see him soon." She found an apartment in April, 2 bedrooms, a decent school district, a parking spot that was technically hers, even if she occasionally had to argue for it with the guy in Unit 4B. She painted Lily's room a yellow so cheerful it was almost aggressive, and she stood back and looked at it and thought, yes, that's right. That's what this room should feel like. Her parents came over for the first dinner she cooked in the new place. Her father walked through every room slowly, checking the windows, the locks, the smoke detectors. The way fathers do when they're processing something too big to say out loud. Her mother sat at the kitchen table and watched Lily run circles in the living room and just kept shaking her head slightly, like she was recalibrating something. "I should have seen it sooner," Yvonne said at one point. "You couldn't have," Verity said. "I was the one who didn't want you to see it." She meant that. She had worked very hard, for a long time, to make sure everyone believed she was fine. She hadn't wanted to admit that she wasn't, because that would have meant admitting that something had gone wrong, that she didn't know how to fix. She understood now that asking for help isn't the same as failing. It took her a while to get there. Most things worth understanding take a while. Ria stayed for dinner that first night in the apartment. They sat around Verity's second-hand table, a solid oak thing she'd found at an estate sale for $40, and ate and talked and put Lily to bed together, trading off the books the way Ria used to read to Verity when they were small. After Lily was down, they sat on the floor of the living room with 2 glasses of wine, because the couch wasn't being delivered until Thursday. The apartment was full of boxes and bare walls, and the particular smell of fresh paint and possibility. You did good, Rhea said. She wasn't talking about the apartment. Verity looked around the room. She thought about the woman who had stood in the dark at the bottom of a staircase 11 weeks ago, pressing her back against a wall, trying to make herself small enough to disappear. She thought about the notebook, about Miss Caldwell's reading glasses, about her father's voice asking, "What do you need?" with that particular quiet certainty. "Yeah," she said, "I think I did." She raised her glass. Rhea raised hers. Outside, the street was ordinary and loud with early spring. Kids somewhere, a dog, someone's music from a window 2 floors up. Verity listened to it and felt, for the first time in a long time, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be.